Please be seated. We will just swap.
Good morning once again. Good morning, Mr. Witness, and I give the floor. Now it's time for the re-questioning by the Office of the Prosecutor, and then the defense teams have the opportunity to follow up because they have the last word, according to our law. And therefore I give the floor to the Office of the Prosecutor.
Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honours. Good morning to you again, Mr. Witness.
Bonjour, Madame le Procureur.
Good morning, Madam Prosecutor.
I have a few questions. Let me start with some questions in follow-up to the questions from His Honour just this morning. Now, the first one related to the questioning on the topic of incursions at the CAS, meaning the scrapyard, in Adjamé. And that was at page 24 of the English Real Time just now. Now, let me just ask you if you can clarify in relation to this particular issue, the scrapyard in Adjamé. Was there an occasion when you met at the État-Major to discuss the issue of incursions by the Invisible Commando at the scrapyard in Adjamé?
Oui.
Yes, we met at the staff HQ to talk about it, since this was a recurrent event. The Commando Invisible regularly took up positions at the CAS in Adjamé and constituted a threat to persons and their property. So we talked about it at the staff HQ.
What month?
Je ne me rappelle plus exactement des...
And so I don't remember the exact dates, but I know that we talked about it at the staff HQ.
Not an exact date, but do you recall whether it was towards the end, towards the beginning, towards the middle of the post-election crisis?
Peut-être vers le milieu, sinon je ne...
Answer, maybe towards the middle. I don't have a specific month in mind, but I know that we talked about it. We discussed the issue at the HQ.
Was it before or after your meeting, your first meeting with the president at the presidency in Plateau? Was it before or after that, if you can recall?
Je ne saurais situer...
I am not able to connect that event to that period. These things happened a long time ago, so I'm not able to say whether it was before or after the meeting, or rather before or after the meetings.
Now, at this particular meeting at the État-Major, can you tell us, please, what was discussed?
Il y a eu un épisode où...
There was an episode involving a significant number of Commando Invisible troops who had taken up position at the CAS. Those troops threatened CRS-2, which was located in Yupogon, opposite the CAS. They threatened to take over the CRS. That lasted a day or two, and they would fire at the CRS on a regular basis from the CAS. So their objective was to capture the CAS, or rather, given that they had taken up position in the evening at the CAS, their purpose was to capture the CRS2 barracks. Now, in our discussions, the planners, through the Chief of General Staff, made a number of operational recommendations or proposals, whereby, and I'm referring to one of those proposals, it was necessary to install a battery at the Agban camp in order to shell the CAS with a view to dislodging those combatants who had been shooting at the CRS, leading to the desertion of the barracks by a number of policemen. That had to be stopped. We discussed that issue. And during the discussions, we came to the view that using the artillery would involve significant risk. But although it was the best way of getting rid of the Commando Invisible from the CAS, the risk was in any event quite high, because the artillery is not generally a very specific weapon. You may hit the target or you may hit something else. You may be out of range. And so we talked about these things. The Northern Highway was right next to the CAS. And so we explained to the Chief of General Staff that if, for example, the test shots fired by the artillery were to miss their target and land on the highway, the Northern Highway, a number of vehicles and passengers could be hit, and that would amount to significant collateral damage, which we were not ready to take responsibility for. After such discussions, the Chief of General Staff did not entertain that option. So that option was dropped. The idea then was to use operations commandos who would infiltrate on foot and link up with some of our men who were already there. And having abandoned the option of the artillery, the planners at that time were considering infiltration by the infantry commando units to drive out the Commando Invisible from the CAS. So that was the nature of the discussions that we had in connection to that issue at the headquarters.
And just to be clear, you're talking about, which artillery are you talking about? Are you talking about mortars?
Affirmative, de mortier, oui.
Yes, mortars, yes.
Talking about Adjamé, was it Williamsville, the area where the scrapyard was located?
La casse n'est pas à Williamsville.
The scrapyard or CAS is not at Williamsville. It's on the other side of the highway from Adjamé to Abobo. But Williamsville, when you're going to Abobo, is entirely to your right, while the CAS is to your left. So it's quite a distance from Williamsville, although at the same time, when you have people in ambush shooting at the CRS-2 and those snipers were targeting it. So this was the situation we were dealing with.
Okay, I understand the CRS, it's the CRS that were based in Williamsville.
Oui.
Yes.
You've described a meeting with planners. Just present at that meeting, was it the usual group of people you've identified before? The group of generals?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
And you say that the option was dropped to use mortars on this location, on the scrapyard. When you had your discussion at the État-Major with the Chief of Staff, at this point, was there already positioned at Camp Agban a mortar for use in this operation? Had it already been set up?
Oui, pas.
Answer, yes. As a precautionary measure, a battery or mortar was set up, and when we finished our discussions and the Chief of General Staff came to a clear position, firm instructions were given at the meeting for the battery to be taken out and to be returned to its base.
And those were instructions from whom to take out the battery and return it to its base?
Le chef d'état-major.
Answer, the Chief of General Staff. After we finished our discussions and he understood our arguments and the relevance therein, the arguments of the generals, including myself, then he said, that's correct, and you're right. So he gave instructions for us to dismantle the arrangement.
Up on this, from which base did it come, the battery that you're talking about? Which base?
Aquedo.
Now,
Aquedo.
to ask you, please, about, now we're on this topic of use of this artillery, were there any other meetings at the État-Major that you recall where you discussed use of multiple rocket launchers?
Oui.
Yes.
Tell us, please, then, what was discussed at this meeting.
Ça, c'est la dernière réunion à laquelle...
That was the last meeting which was attended by all the generals, and I think it was on the 30th of March, if I'm not mistaken. As I've already explained in answer to your questions, we were in a situation where all the troops had started moving back to Abidjan. They had left their positions and were moving back to Abidjan. The Chief of General Staff was in a position which all generals could easily understand, a situation where we knew that we were losing the operation that we were conducting. So that can be extremely stressful. So the Chief of General Staff said, if those who are at the Gulf, who are bothering us, may I say, if that's what the situation is, I am going to send them a few LRMs. And again, we had discussions, and we told him that this was not a good option because the Gulf was not a military target, even though some soldiers were at that position. And we said that the Gulf Hotel, by definition, is a hotel and not a military target. So he said, okay, and we proceeded. But madam, let me explain something to you. There is a common thread when you look through these types of discussions that we had. Right from the onset of the crisis, we had a lot of discussions at the État-Major. I have told you already that in our assemblies, we do not vote. It is the chief who decides. He has the final word. Now, the Chief of General Staff was someone who was very available, very understanding, very open-minded, and he used to listen a lot. And whenever he understood the relevance of an argument as compared to his own operational choices, he would revisit the arguments and agree with the solutions that were proposed by all the other generals. Now, this means, and contrary to what I have often heard here or elsewhere, we were not connected to any specific institutions on a particular basis. We were responsible people, and if a decision was proposed that did not look appropriate, we had discussions on that proposal. And like I said a short while ago, our chief was a very open-minded person who would align with the generals, as I have already indicated in the two previous cases we have just discussed. That's the clarification I wanted to provide.
And just to be clear, I'm sure, of course, their honours are aware, when you say LRM, you're talking about multiple rocket launcher.
Affirmatif.
Yes, that's correct.
And just on what was said at this meeting, do you yourself recall you saying anything at this meeting as part of the discussion?
Je l'ai déjà dit, je dis.
Answer. I have already said that some generals proposed that those types of weapons were not appropriate for those two circumstances, and I was one of those who was of that opinion. In any event, what we need to understand is that the Chief of General Staff adopted the position proposed by the generals in the two cases, and the proposed weapons for use in those two cases were not used as initially proposed.
On this meeting, you say it was on the 30th of March. Who was present?
L'ensemble de ceux qui ont l'habitude de.
All those who usually attended. And on that occasion, the chief of the CCI and the commander who was in charge of the fronts within the country, that's in the hinterland.
Do you mean Conan?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
And the commander of the CCI, by that you mean Kouakou, is that right?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
And we've heard that you discussed the use of multiple rocket launchers on this occasion. Is there anything else that you discussed at this meeting on the 30th of March? This was just before you stood down.
Oui, on avait...
Yes. Since the troops had quit their positions to return to Abidjan, the Chief of General Staff proposed that what was referred to as the Battle of Abidjan be organized. So we had some discussions around that. Some were of the view that if we had such a big project, we should have at least asked the troops to withdraw step by step, thereby giving them various positions that would enable us to defend Abidjan effectively. But it's not possible to defend Abidjan when you're already in Abidjan. So that would not have been a very successful strategy. But in any event, the plan for the Battle of Abidjan was discussed. Various strategies were envisaged, and there were different opinions as to the strategies. That day, we ended up separating from each other, but then we didn't have any other meeting from the next day up until today.
Closing up on this, in relation to the discussion on the Battle of Abidjan, do you recall what you said in relation to what the Chief of Staff had proposed in relation to the organisation of the battle?
C'est ce que je laissais entendre.
Well, that's what I've been saying, namely that I was of the view that if there was such a project to be envisioned, we would not have allowed all the troops to return to Abidjan. We would have adopted a more operational and tactical approach, because it was not good for the troops to withdraw from Yamoussoukro to Abidjan, a distance of 200 kilometers, at a time when there was no major opposition or when we were not under any hot pursuit. So we could have taken measures to slow down the withdrawal process, and in so doing, provide some two or three different defense positions. We would not have had all the troops coming down into Abidjan to defend Abidjan. So I was of the view that this would not have been a very good strategy. Personally, I did not agree with that operational idea. Now the meeting ended, and everyone understood that there was danger in the air. The very next day, we tried to reach the Chief of General Staff unsuccessfully, and everyone took measures regarding their own personal security, just as I did regarding my personal security.
Okay, we'll move on from that meeting in that case, and go to another topic that was raised by His Honour just before we had the break, and that was the topic of the presence of Mr. Gbagbo at any meetings that you attended, and you were talking then, in particular, about the meetings that you've described at the presidential palace. And I want to ask you about the presence of Mr. Gbagbo.
Mr. Bugnon, I'm sorry, Mr. President, can she indicate the page of the transcript that she's quoting, please?
Yes, it's pages 21 and 22 of the English real-time transcript. It was just before the break, in fact. So I think nothing more specific than that, than just the last few questions before the break this morning. If I can just proceed then. So the question, your answer related to the meetings at the presidency, the presidential palace. So I would like to ask you about meetings at the residence, the presidential residence, and whether or not Mr. Gbagbo was ever present at those meetings. And I'll just take you to some footage that we played last week in relation to a meeting in January 2011 at the presidential residence. And perhaps you can just help us with this. Let me just read out the reference. Now, this is a video, and if we could just have control of the evidence channel. It's CIV OTP 00640110, and the relevant footage is at 00:04:20 to 00:05:00. And the relevant transcript is CIV OTP 00861013. And the relevant page of the transcript is 1014. I'm just going to play it, and if you could just watch that, and then I'll ask you a couple of questions after.
Monsieur le Président.
Maître Bougnon.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Bugnon. Mr. President, I have found a page of the transcript in French, and I believe that the prosecutor is referring to that page. It is page 19, as from line 21. The question of the presiding judge is as follows. So, one of them is a question from the questions that Mr. Bougnon asked you this morning, unless I'm mistaken, but it seems that you spoke these last days, and please correct me if I'm mistaken. You talked about two meetings in February and March in the presence of Mr. Gbagbo, who was president at the time, with the generals. Is that correct? End of quote. Mr. President, in your question, there was no indication, no mention of the presidential palace, and no indication or mention of at all to the residents. So that is what the transcript says, and I wanted to point out that to the chamber.
Maître Altit.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Altit, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to add something. It was stated specifically that Mr. Gbagbo was not there in those meetings as the witness answered that question. So the link is rather tenuous in relation to the question being put by the counsel for the prosecution right now.
Yes, I left it open, residence or palace, because I didn't know. I left it open to the witness to respond. So
Yes.
I don't understand the intervention, must say. But please.
Can I clarify for Mr. Bougnon, because if you then
Yes.
read the next two lines, the
Yes.
answer specifically relates to the Palais Présidentiel. So
Yes.
there is that differential made, and so my question just relates to seeking clarity over the different types of meetings. There are two types of meetings. There's ones at the residence and ones at the palace.
Yes.
And the answer at
The answer was at the
line 20,
was
page 20, line 1 of the French, then talks about two meetings which took place at the presidential palace.
Right.
Hence my follow-up question to clarify.
okay. So please go ahead, Madam Prosecutor.
Thank you. And if we could just play the video, and this is video footage prosecution will be playing a meeting on the 12th of January 2011.
J'ai la parole, Monsieur le Président.
Do you have the floor, Mr. President?
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, before objecting, I would like to have the witness asked to leave the courtroom.
Mr. Witness, can you please leave the courtroom for a few minutes because the counsel is objecting and yes.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Bugnon, Mr. President, to begin with, real-time transcript, page 20 from line 1. This is the answer of the witness, and I quote, "There were two main meetings which took place at the Palace of the Presidency at the Plateau in February and March in the presence of the head of state at the time." End of quote. Mr. President, the video that the prosecution wants to show the witness is video footage that speaks instead of the residents. And I'm reading the transcript of that video from line 5. It is written, "Yesterday, Wednesday, the President of the Republic, President Laurent Gbagbo, discussed with the main commanders of the National Army."
With respect, that was the point of the question.
Yes. Yes. No,
mais Monsieur le Président, la manière,
Mr. Bugnon, but Mr. President, the manner in which the question is being brought up, because when she starts telling the witness that you said a short while ago that you did not attend a meeting in the palace, and then they're being shown a meeting, he's being shown a meeting in the residence in cote, that is not fair, because he had said that this two main meetings, Mr. Gbagbo was not present. That is clear enough.
well, first of all, I didn't imagine that my question creates then such problems, but this is always a matter of how to pose the questions. I think we are all much too elaborated in posing questions. We should just pose the question. And therefore, I would ask you to pose the question so that there no misunderstanding can be. Sorry for the speed. and that we are fair to the witness. And I repeat, the witness is strong enough to oppose to. He can't be treated unfairly. I think he demonstrated in the last days that he's good enough also to respond, saying exactly what he thinks.
Yes, Your Honour.
So I would now ask the witness to be brought in again. But without going back, you have said, just put the question.
Yes. It's a meeting at the residence on the 12th of January. I'll remind him of that, but then I want to play
No,
the
you don't
footage.
remind him. Have you seen that? What is that?
He's seen it before. We've showed it to him before
I know.
in last week.
So you remember? And
Yes,
think.
absolutely. I'd like to play the footage, if I may, Your Honour.
Yes, please.
Pour cible les forces de défense et de sécurité et les populations qui n'adhèrent pas à
and the populations that did not agree with them. The President of the Republic, Mr. Laurent Gbagbo, was briefed on the earlier meeting that the generals had at the General Staff. The commanders of the Navy, the Air Force, the Ground Forces, Secors, the Gendarmerie, and the police. And General Philip Mangu took measures to secure the territory and stop all attempts to make certain communes of Abidjan incontrollable. And the meeting was expanded to include members of government, particularly Prime Minister Gilbert Akengbo.
Questions in relation to that meeting? Do you recall a meeting at the residence on the 12th January 2011?
Oui,
Yes,
je me rappelle de la rencontre.
I remember the meeting, but since this was a very long time ago, I really do not remember the details of our discussions, but I've followed the comments made by the journalists.
Do you recall if Mr. Blegudet was present at that meeting also? Or at part of it?
Mais il est bien.
But it is specified that the meeting was expanded to include members of the government, and Mr. Blegudet was a member of the government at the time, so it is quite possible that he would have taken part in that meeting if the head of state found it necessary.
Thank you. I'll move to another topic, please. Now, you were asked in questioning this morning, and this was in questioning by my learned friend, Mr. Bougnon. You were asked about a name of a Captain Maury, and you were asked to spell that name. Now, with Your Honour's permission, I'd like to just put in e-court an official document. It's a defence document. It's not on the list of material. It is in e-court anyway. If I could put it up and use it and show it to the witness with reference to this name. It's CIV D15 0001 6610. If I could use that in my question briefly.
Yes, what is this? Excuse me?
It's the name of the Captain Maury. There was an issue over the spelling, and the witness wrote the spelling on a bit of paper, and I wanted just to go to an official document and just ask the witness to look at the name, as it is shown on the official document.
What is an official document?
It's an official gazette for Cote d'Ivoire. It's about the promotions of members of the gendarmerie. It's not dissimilar to one of the documents Your Honours saw in the last few days. I'll just get the full title correct.
But are we sure that we are talking about the same person?
Well, perhaps the witness can confirm that if he looks at it.
Maître Bougnon?
Mr. Bougnon, Mr. President, I would simply refer to paragraph 36 of the Conduct of the Proceedings, ICC 02-1101-15-498, and paragraph 36. It states that when questioning a witness, the parties and legal representatives of victims can always ask for authorization to use materials other than those appearing on the lists, on condition that they demonstrate to the chamber the relevance of those additional materials and explain why they were not included in the initial list. without prejudice to the rights of the defense in Article 67. So in this context, the parties will communicate documents, only documents that they intend to use for the questioning of the witness. Mr. President, that is why I am strongly objecting to this document being presented, because the prosecutor has not explained the relevance or why the document was not included in the list of materials to be used.
Maître Altit.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Altit, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Your Honors, we object to the use of that document because, not only because it is not on the list of documents, but the prosecution has given an argument which we have heard, and also it is not on the list of evidence of the prosecution. That is important.
Précise.
And I would like to specify that it was never used by the defense.
Explain.
Of course.
This is an issue that was raised in cross-examination this morning, the spelling of this individual's name. So it became an issue this morning for the prosecution to address. And in the interests of justice and truth-seeking, we've sought to use a defense document that was disclosed to us, as I understand it, by the defense, that's got a D number in the ERN, so the supposition is it comes from the defense. And it's a journal officiel de la République de Côte d'Ivoire, probably the kind of document that the submission of which would not unduly prejudice at all, it prejudice remotely the defence. It's in the interest of fairness to just show this. It's just a name and to lend clarity to an issue which is being confused this morning. It's a Journal Officiel. It's dated the 25th October 2007, and it attaches and has it on it a decree which I will just be seeking the witness to look at.
Monsieur le Président.
Maître Altit.
Mr. Altit, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I am on my feet because counsel for the prosecution was on her feet also. Otherwise, I would not have stood up because the defense has the last word. The document was not used by the defense. And therefore, the issue is not to know whether there is an important prejudice or not. It is a matter of principle. We have to respect rules or not. If they wanted to add it to their list of evidence, they should do that in a timely manner.
Mr. President, could I add on
Yes.
behalf of our team as a final word that a document becomes only a document when it's submitted to the court. It's for the defense to make the decision, and if the defense has not submitted this document, it has reasons for it. It can refrain from using it, and it's not up to the prosecution to say then there's no prejudice because it's in the e-court. It's a document which not yet before the court. Therefore, cannot be so that the prosecution asserts that there is no prejudice because it's a document which is characterized with the letter D for defense. That doesn't make it an official document before the court, and therefore it's a document which cannot be used in re-examination. Thank you.
Well, I cannot understand where is the problem. In any case, the problem of identifying a person, which seems to be the only issue here. I invite the prosecutor to submit the official journal as a document to the chamber without now confronting the witness with it, and we will deal with it in argumentatively.
Thank you, Mr. President. The only issue I ask in relation to that, though, is that we have the witness here. He's
know.
identified this person. If he can look at the name, he could confirm or not if it's the same person he's been speaking about.
But
The logic would-
I'm really.
Do you know, I'll ask a question in relation to it. The Captain Mori, of whom you've spoken, do you know if he was promoted to the grade of captain in 2007? And this would be by a decree of July 2007. Do you know if he was promoted then in July 2007 to the rank of captain, Captain Mori?
Oui.
Yes.
Okay, and that's in reference to a decree of the 18th July 2007. Thank you, Mr. Witness. I'll move to another topic, Your Honour. Now, I want to ask you, you were shown some documents on Friday last week in questioning by my learned friend representing Mr. Gbagbo. It was related to casualties suffered by SECOS during the post-electoral crisis. And I want to show you a list, I'll ask it to be brought up, of deceased persons from the FDS. It's 00290473 with the OTP prefix. All right, now this is a list of FDS fatalities.
Mon frère, nous n'avons rien à l'écran.
Mr. Keita, we cannot see anything on the screen.
Mr. Keita, it should be at evidence 1 if that is pressed on the monitor for both the witness and my learned friend. I hope you have it in front of you now, Mr. Witness.
Oui.
Yes.
Of deceased persons from the FDS who were received their bodies at the Ivosep mortuary in Trècheville, and this was bodies received during the crisis after the crisis, in fact, up to May 2011, it appears from the document. Now, I'll ask you, please, we can go to page 0474. And if you look there, please, at the entry at number 31, is this the element, the SECOS element, who you told us about last week, who was killed, Yapi Satana Désiré?
Yes.
And we see there in the fourth column along, which I can tell you just from the first page, is entitled, quote in French, Date d'entrée à la mort.
Date of entry into the mortuary.
That he arrived in the mortuary on the 26th of February 2011. to your knowledge, was that the date of his death?
Quelle date vous avez dit?
Which date was that? 26th of February 2011? Yes, he died on that day.
And just take your time to look at this page, and then I'll ask to go back to the page before if you recognise any of the FDS elements here recorded on this document. Anyone else by name?
Oui, bien sûr.
Yes, of course.
Any SECOS elements you can identify?
Pas spécifiquement.
Not specifically SECOS elements, but there are other members of the Defense and Security Forces who were killed during the crisis.
Name the ones you recognise, please.
Les deux colonels qui sont.
The two colonels at number 49 and at number 52.
Okay, we see the date upon which they entered the mortuary as 4th of April and 11th of May, respectively. Let us go to the preceding page, please, which is page 0473. Do you recognise any of the names on this page? Can you just state the number, the entry number?
Je ne reconnais pas.
I do not recognize any of the names that is on their full names.
Just to be complete, if we just go to the last page, 475, and same question.
Je ne reconnais pas.
I do not recognize any of the non-commissioned officers on this page of the document.
We'll leave that and we can move on in that case. Now I'd like to take you back to the 16th of December 2010, and this is specifically in relation to questioning by my learned friend for representing Mr. Gbagbo. You were asked about the rules of engagement on the 16th December, and that was at the transcript reference in the French real-time transcript T140, page 46, lines 20 and following, and the equivalent in English real-time was at page 47, lines 4 and following. There was a question in the French at line 10, which I won't read, and then at line 20 in the French, your answer quote in French, Je voulais rappeler
I wanted to recall that the law enforcement operations are governed by the instrument that the prosecuting counsel presented to us yesterday, 1967. And that in accordance with that document, the use of force and the use of weapons within the context of law enforcement activities is subject to specific procedures characterized by the issuance of specific requisitions for the use of force and specific conditions for the use of weapons. These are the provisions of the law of 67 for activities related to law enforcement. But generally speaking, we have the possibility, that is, the forces of law and order have the possibility, in the case of legitimate self-defense, that is, of your colleagues or of yourself. And given that the first hypothesis for the implementation of the law was not applicable in the environment in which we found ourselves, given that the authority, the civil authority that issues the requisition has to be in the field, whereas on the 16th of December, no civilian authority could be in the field, and you fully understand why. And so we have another possibility, which is legitimate self-defense, and that is why we underscored that second hypothesis.
Now, I want to be very clear. What was the legal basis for the continued deployment of the armed forces of Fancy during the blockade of the Gulf Hotel and during the 16 December march?
Maître Altit.
Merci, Monsieur.
Maître Altit, thank you, Mr. President. I object to the question which is talked about a blockage of the Hotel du Golfe. This is a term that was never used by the witness, and the question is therefore a leading question.
I would also say that I mean the legal basis. Do you think about the legal basis? I mean, I have some problems with the legal basis, but don't use in any case terms which are not used by the witness.
Okay, so on the 16 December 2010, what was the legal basis? What was the legal basis for the deployment of the armed forces, Fancy, in Abidjan?
I believe
And
it's the same question.
No, it isn't. It hasn't got the reference.
This is not legal. It's not leading. But yes, I don't want to say more because then I would influence the witness. But let's hear the witness.
Monsieur le Président, est-ce que la question peut être reposée, s'il vous plaît?
Let me change the question. To your recollection, was there an official document deploying the armed forces, on the basis of which they were in situ in Abidjan on the 16 December?
D'accord. Qu'est-ce que Madame...
Very well. The expression armed forces, madam, what does that include? I'm a soldier from Cote d'Ivoire. Now, maybe armed forces for you might not have the same meaning, but we need to agree on the meaning of armed forces. You have used another term which we need to agree on its meaning. The expression you used was deployment. In situ. What sites are you talking about?
I'm asking the questions, and I'm not being specific about the sites. And when I talk about the armed forces, I'm talking about FANCI, Forces Armées Nationales. That's what I'm talking about, just to be clear. Does that clarify your question?
C'est toujours pas clair. Hein?
We talked about, last week, we talked about a decree of the 14th of November 2010. You might recall we talked about it. We talked about a decree that requisitioned the Forces Armées Nationales de Côte d'Ivoire. Do you recall being questioned about that last week?
Affirmatif.
The witness, yes.
Be very clear then. Thinking about that decree, I ask the question again. To your knowledge, was there an official document which provided the legal basis for the presence of armed forces, the deployment of armed forces in Abidjan on the 16th December?
Vous avez vous-même...
Answer. You yourself have referred to a decree requisitioning the armed forces. That is the decree which requires the armed forces to be involved in the law enforcement activities of that day because the decree was still in force. The requisitioning order was still in force.
Thank you.
But do we need a witness to tell us this? I mean, we know already that there was a decree.
Well,
I don't know. No, I have not understood either the question, but
we leave it there.
yes, please.
Now, to your knowledge, how many times, to your knowledge, were the armed forces requisitioned before 2010?
Chaque fois que des besoins, c'est...
Answer. Whenever there was a need, the political authorities would assess the situation and would request the armed forces. I don't remember the number of times. I can't count the number of times, but whenever it was necessary.
Positioned in 2000? In
Yes,
December?
but if he said he can't remember, I mean...
I'll leave it there. Now, I want to ask you, please, about another issue, and this is an issue about which the prosecution emailed the trial chamber on Friday. So I don't know whether it's appropriate to deal with this in the absence of the witness or whether it's a matter about which your honours can rule now. It's simply the question of whether or not the prosecution is should question the witness appropriately on the document that was circulated for the record CIV OTP 00450729. I'm in your honour's hands as to how properly to deal with this.
No, I think that we should give the floor to the parties. This in the absence of the witness, and then we will decide on that, and then the witness come back, and we'll see what happens. So, Mr. Witness, please, can you leave? There is an issue we have to discuss without you being present. So, if you can leave for a few minutes the courtroom, thank you. I think the parties are all aware on what is the issue at stake. I mean, there is an email from yesterday by the Office of the Prosecutor requesting, in light of the questioning of witness P10 on behalf of Mr. Gbagbo and in particular on the issue of personnes armées, and noting the questioning of document 00450732, we consider that it is incumbent upon us to refer to trial chamber to the following document disclosed under Article 67.2 to the defense teams, in particular CIV OTP 00450729, which were attached to the email. So, if there is something to say by the parties, please, Maître le titre.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Maître Artit, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Your Honors, on the 31st of March, as you said, Mr. President, the prosecution asked to question the witness on a document that was not listed on its list of evidence and therefore was not disclosed accordingly. This discussion is quite similar to the one we have just had. We objected to the presentation of the document, which we dealt with a few minutes ago, and we maintain the same objection for this document for several reasons, which I will now broach quite quickly. One, on several occasions, this chamber has decided that during a re-examination, it is not possible to use new documents that were not used in the examination in chief. Two, this document does not figure on the list of the prosecution list of evidence, and it has been the consistent position of the chamber that the prosecutor cannot use documents that are not listed on its list of documents. Now, if you were to grant the prosecutor's request, this would amount to giving the prosecution leave to amend its list of documents freely during an examination of a witness. Three, the prosecutor has not provided any substantial reason to waive this principle guiding our proceedings, which you yourself, you as a chamber, have put in place. In fact, this document has been in the prosecutor's possession since July 2013, and the prosecutor has had more than about 2 years between then and June 2015, which was the deadline for submitting its list of documents, to decide whether it was or it was not going to use those documents. Today, the counsel for the prosecutor claims that it is because of the examination of the defense that this document has become useful. Now, in relation to the issue of armed civilians or the presence of armed civilians at the march of 16th of December involves civilians. And that argument cannot hold sway because the presence of civilians in that march of the 16th of December is a matter that was raised right from the beginning of these proceedings, even in the confirmation hearings phase. There is therefore no surprise for the prosecution in this regard, because this matter was discussed at the confirmation hearings in February 2013 and in the document on the prosecutor's evidence submitted by the defense in March 2015, and I refer the Chamber to that document in particular. The defense, from the very onset, has provided evidence that it was an armed insurrectional march that we were dealing with, and therefore the prosecutor ought to have anticipated that defense was going to be addressing this issue, particularly with this witness. Your Honors, the prosecutor voluntarily decided to ignore the armed nature of the march of 16th of December right from the beginning of this trial. The problem has been consistently in this case that once the prosecutor comes face to face with reality, he changes his game plan. And again, the prosecuting officer is trying to take advantage of a situation to his benefit and to amend his own storyline. 4, it is not for the prosecutor to determine the time at which certain documents can be presented to the chamber outside of his own examination time. The prosecutor has notified for each witness or disclosed for each witness a number of documents which he has not used. But the defense has never asked him to use such and such a document because the defense does not intervene in the strategy of the prosecutor. Defense delved into the essential matters relating to the examination of P10 for the benefit of all, and when it came to additional materials, paragraph 40 of the rule on the conduct of proceedings, paragraph 43 on the rule of the conduct of proceedings is indeed quite relevant. And my last point, Your Honors, is as follows. We object to the presentation of this document, and as a subsidiary argument, if your chamber were to admit this document, and given that it is one of our documents, we would ask to open up examination of this witness on this particular document, because we are not dealing here again with a matter of re-examination, as it were. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Knopes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Honors, we refer to the ruling of the Chamber of 13 May 2016, paragraphs 21, 22, in which, in paragraph 21, the court unequivocally stated that the Chamber will not allow the prosecution to introduce new potential incriminating evidence after the disclosure deadline, except for, that's paragraph 22, when the material is entirely new, not a duplication, and could only have been obtained by the prosecution after the disclosure deadline. Being this portrayed within the principle of having the defense right to know the entirety of its case. This document, Mr. President, in question was disclosed on the 9th of May 2014. Therefore, it does not meet the criteria of paragraph 22 of your ruling, namely the exceptions which are enumerated there, and therefore the principle, as the court has set in paragraph 21 of this ruling of 13 May 2016, clearly applies here, and therefore the request of the prosecution should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honour, of course, it's a matter for you as to whether or not you wish to receive this document
No,
now.
yeah, I know.
We would say that this witness is the best person,
Yes.
the person best placed to deal with this document because
Yes.
he received it.
I
and
was going to
of course-
decide
I'll
on
leave.
the matter.
Thank you, Your Honour.
No. You have already spoken,
C'est tout à fait exact, monsieur.
Maître Alti, that is correct. And I'm on my feet again because we have all spoken, and I don't see why the prosecutor had the last word, as always.
Stopped her. So, the chamber has taken note of the prosecutor's request to be allowed to question this witness, witness P10, on a document which is neither on the prosecutor's list of evidence nor on the prosecutor's material for witness P10. And I'm referring for the record to the document CIV OTP 00450729. Having heard the parties and having taken note of the document, the chamber, in light of its content and in application of Article 69(3) of the statute, whereby the court shall have the authority to request the submission of all evidence that it considers necessary for the determination of the truth, and not therefore because of the submission, the late submission of the office of the prosecutor, considers it appropriate for the search of the truth to order that the document be submitted in the record of the case, and that the prosecutor be allowed to refer to the document in the context of the re-examination of witness P10. It goes without saying that, well, but I say it, of course, that the other parties will also be allowed to question the witness on the same document if they so wish, on the basis of Rule 142D of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence. Therefore, I request the court usher to bring the witness in again. Mr. Witness, we had only a procedural discussion on a document, nothing in the merits. I give the floor to the Office of the Prosecutor for her re-questioning.
Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honours. Could we just have brought up CIV OTP 00450729? And if you just take your time, it's headed the bulletin, in French, Bulletin quotidien d'information.
Daily information report.
Numéro 28, journée du jeudi.
Number 28, Thursday, 16 December.
Le chef PC opération. Unquote, and you, end quote, and you are the one of the recipients. And we'll just go over to the second page, and I'd just like to ask you if it's a document that you recognise. Let's just go right to the end, to the signature at 0731, the signature page. Is it a document that you received?
Non, Madame le Procureure.
The witness, no. Madam Prosecutor, no.
Let's just go to the first page, please. Not received by you.
Je vois que je suis destinataire.
I can see that I'm one of the addressees.
Okay.
Do you remember having? You don't remember having ever seen this document? Is this the what you want to say?
C'est ce que je voulais dire à ma...
That's what I wanted to tell the prosecutor, Mr. President. It is true that I appear as one of the recipients, but I don't remember seeing this document.
All right, and we see the name on the last page. You've been shown a document by this sender before. You recognise the name of Yoro, Claude Yoro, as the chef PC opération at this time, 16 December?
Oui, mais il faudra...
Answer, yes. But I think we are revisiting the same facts that we have talked about over and over again. This matter is an internal matter for the National Police. The meeting that took place the day before was one under the auspices of the Director General of the National Police, and he was the one in charge of the planning and operational conduct of security operations relating to the march of the 16th of December. Now, but when it came to their internal arrangements, it was their right. I don't know that I know Yoro as the person in charge of the PC, but I think this is a matter that falls squarely with the Director General of the National Police.
Okay, understanding that, we'll just look at some of the content.
No, we don't look at the content if he doesn't know. He doesn't know anything about this document.
But if there's a specific part of the content that he might be able to speak to.
But beside the document as such, you can put a question, but...
Okay, I'm going to put you a question. Did you ever yourself receive information that SECOS, on the 16th December, opened fire on armed demonstrators at the mairie in Adjamé?
Ce que je vais dire là, c'est...
Answer. Let me say this to the prosecutor and specifically to the court. We have been here for about a week, and I've been repeating over and over the procedures that guided our actions. The forces together make available to the commander of the operations, who was the DG of the police, who would then provide guidance, supervision, and deployment, and take care of all the operational activities involving those troops. Why is it then that when there is an activity involving SECOS troops that have been made available to the Director General of the Police, why is it that I'm being questioned about those facts, whereas I did not manage anything on that day? Now, pursuant to our practice, this is all I wanted to say, Mr. President.
I'd like to repeat the question, though, because the question wasn't answered. I'd like to repeat the question, okay? The question is clear. Did you receive yourself any information of SECOS opening fire on armed demonstrators at the mairie in Dje on the 16th December 2010.
Monsieur,
No.
I don't see how that's
Excuse
objectionable.
me. The question is quite clear. Have you ever had information in your capacity as commander of the SECOS of this opening fire as said by Madam Prosecutor?
If necessary, we can go into private session.
No.
That was, I think, probably my friend's no, what my friend was
Do you want to go in private session?
Non, Monsieur le Président.
No, Mr. President.
Just asking if you have heard about this, if you have taken note, if somebody told you, if you are aware, whatever, of this allegation.
Je n'ai pas eu d'information.
I did not receive any information, and I was not supposed to receive information on this event. The report was made by the Director General of the Police as the person conducting the operation. It was under his responsibility. So none of the commanders of the Navy, the Gendarmerie, and so on, we cannot just pick out one element of the report because it concerns their elements. It is only one responsible officer who carries out the operations, who draws the consequences, and who would conduct an investigation if necessary. It was not SECOS as such. It was a detachment of SECOS that was placed at the disposal of the DGPN for deployment. We have to be sufficiently clear about that.
Are clear, I think, but the thing was not that you had something to do to decide upon that you had the right to have information about it, not that you were involved. The only question was if you later heard about this.
Je me rappelle plus parce que
I no longer remember.
Thank you, Your Honour. Mr. Witness, let me just recall to you the letter, the earliest statement that we have from you related to the 16 December events. And this is your letter dated the 11th of January 2011. And you brought it to court last week, the letter to the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. It's CIV REG 0001-0148. And this is the letter, the copy of the document that the witness brought to court.
We have it.
And if we can go, please, to 0316.
What do you mean?
Sorry, it's not 0316. It's the following page. I'm sorry, I'm confusing my references. Please forgive me. And it's the fourth from bottom and third from bottom paragraph. We just go to those. I'll just read them out. You say this. This is to the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who'd written to you a letter about the 16 December events. You say, quote, Au cours des
During the demonstrations of the 16th of December 2010, when the demonstrators crossed all the roadblocks of the police forces, SECOS was instructed to prevent them from reaching the RTI between the Saint Jean Church and the carrefour known as Carrefour de la Vie. This intervention, commanded by a senior officer of the police, the chief of SECOS operations, was quite successful. The demonstrators were pushed back right to Adjamé without any notable opposition. There was no loss of human life at that location.
To be clear, is this the sum of your knowledge of what happened on 16 December event so far as SECOS was concerned?
À un endroit bien précis.
This was at a very specific location. This is an incident that happened at a very specific location, which you have just read. I gave that clarification about a specific location and a specific intervention.
Anything in your letter, in this letter in January 2011, about SECOS supposedly opening fire on armed demonstrators? Anything in this letter on that topic?
Excuse me, we have the letter. Why should we, if he says anything in the letter, we'll read it and we know it.
All right, I'll leave it, Your Honour.
Thank you.
Now, let me just ask you relatedly, you brought this document with you last week, and you mentioned that you had documents with you to refresh your memory. Can you just tell us what documents did you bring with you here to Den Haag to refresh your memory?
No. His documents, I mean, no. I don't admit any question on this. We have ruled on this and that's it. No.
Your Honors, we're asking for reconsideration.
No, we are not reconsidering.
Just on one point, if you allow us to be heard. It's going to take 2 minutes. We understand you did not grant the request to have the documents brought. That's fine. What we're asking now, and I think it is important, besides a statement as provided by the VWU, what other documents did he consult while testifying? It goes to his credibility, Your Honor. It goes to the assessment of credibility. And this is a very important issue.
No, it does not go to it doesn't go anywhere, let me say. I mean, he is a free person. He can have his no. I do not admit any question. We have ruled on this, and that's it.
Your Honour, those are all my questions. Mr. Witness, those are all my questions in re-examination. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I ask, obviously, the defense teams if, on the basis of Rule 142D, they have questions to put to the witness after the re-questioning.
Mr. Altit, thank you, Mr. President. We do not have any questions, Your Honor.
Very much. Mr. Knoops.
Mr. President, our team has no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I can finally announce to you, Mr. Witness, that after quite a few days you have spent here in court, your testimony has come to an end, and therefore I just want to thank you for having been here, for having answered the question of all the parties and the chamber, and I wish you a good trip back. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
The witness, thank you very much, Your Honor.
I have also to say that we continue with witness 176 tomorrow morning because of two reasons. One is that Mr. Wagemakers seems to be only tomorrow available, but he could have also probably been made available before, but I do not feel completely well, so I think it's better if we go to tomorrow. Thank you very much. Tomorrow at 9:30.
Arise, veuillez vous lever.